Fantastic. Well, I know from doing the show for a long time now that if you've studied to be a doctor, you've been trained to do things that I would consider the wrong way. So I'm always fascinated to talk to low-carb doctors because it means that you've made a couple transitions. You've made probably the biggest one being that you can tackle how a lot of diseases harm your patients with lifestyle interventions instead of pills or whatever. Plus, you've also made the transition that steak and red meat is not the most terrible thing in the world, and maybe that sugar is. So that part of the story always interests me. How did you make those transitions and start to see things in a new light than maybe how you were trained?
Look, really good point. And it's funny because I was having a chat with a colleague this morning about how as doctors compared to engineers, we tend to be a little bit less inclined to want to solve problems and tend to more just accept what we're told by you know, professors and those who are deemed to be sort of superior in inverted commas to us. So medicine is a little bit hierarchical in that regard. I first became interested in, I suppose, in looking at things a different way about 14, 15 years ago. There were a couple of American visiting lecturers who were at a conference that I attended, and they were talking at that time about anti-aging medicine. And a lot of what they were talking about was use of hormones, which, to be honest, I didn't particularly warm to, although I could see a role for it. But they really spoke a lot about lifestyle, and it just got me sort of thinking, and particularly when they're talking about sugar and the effects of sugar on the body. And it just got me thinking, well, if you go back to basic human physiology, then that dictates that when we put any glucose or carbohydrates into the body will release insulin, and the role of insulin is to convert that carbohydrate into fat and store it as such. So surely if we're telling people to eat a lot of this sort of food, maybe we shouldn't be surprised that the end result is people are storing a lot of it as fat. And probably over the years, as people do, you go down the rabbit hole, you read some papers, you talk to people, you attend conferences. It's a bit like being in the Matrix, and once you've sort of swallowed the red pill, it's sort of hard to unswallow it. And probably the last 5 years or so, I've in a few areas really become convinced that I have to be a little bit careful what I say, but I suppose in medicine we're not particularly well led. I think by people who are rightly or wrongly seen as leaders of the profession, and I can only speak, I suppose, for Australia, but when I look around the world, it seems very similar in the US and the UK and other countries. There seems to be this very hierarchical top-down view. You do what we tell you and you don't question it, and if you do, we'll have a crack at you. And if they're all doing everything correct, look, maybe fine, but when you actually seriously question a lot of the received wisdom that doctors and the public are supposed to accept, you actually find that it doesn't have much basis. I suppose once you've seen that, you can't unsee it.